Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Double Booked. I'm Irene, and today we are covering another Sarah Dessen book to continue our Summer of Sarah series. Today we're talking about Dreamland, and Dreamland is quite the book to be reading. Just a huge trigger warning. This book goes into, violence and abuse. Partner spouse, or it's not spousal, but it is partner abuse. So I'll just spoil it right at the top. Roderson is our male love interest, and he abuses Caitlin, our main character. She is suffering at his hands throughout most of this book. I just want to say right off the bat, if you want to skip this video and not watch it, I totally get it. It is a really hard pill to swallow. Domestic abuse is never okay. Any type of violence towards your partner is never okay. And I just want to say, if anybody is experiencing those things, that is not your fault. You do not deserve whatever is happening to you. And there will be links and resources in the description of this video that you can go and click on and use. Hopefully nobody has to use it that is watching these videos. Unfortunately, though, I know that's not the reality for, unfortunately, more people than I would like to think it happens to. But just know it's not your fault. It's never your fault. And if you need to skip this video, I totally get it, but know that there is somebody out there for you. And truthfully, I mean, if you need to slide into our DMs to talk to somebody, I am more than happy to talk to you. But I just wanted to let everybody know right off the bat that this book is incredibly intense. And as an adult reading it back, it is much more intense than I even began to realize as a teenager. So let's just go over the plot really quick. Our main character is Caitlin. She's spent her life living in the shadow of her older sister, Cassandra. On the morning of her 16th birthday, her sister has run away. Cass was supposed to go to Yale in the fall, but cracked under the pressure. Caitlin becomes invisible to her family yet again as they try to make sure Cassandra is taken care of and okay. Caitlin joins a cheer squad and meets Roderson. Her whole world is turned upside down when she meets him, but he is harboring a dark, moody side that hurts Caitlin in more ways than one. It's a lot, so again, a huge trigger warning for this book. It's a rough one to get through, but honestly, I think it is so well written, and I commend Sarah Dessen for speaking up and talking about this because violence against women is not talked about enough. And no matter how much we talk about it, I feel like it's never talked about enough. No matter what anybody says, that's just a personal opinion of mine. It's just a personal opinion of mine. I think that we need to talk about domestic violence and violence against women in general. Unfortunately, even though we are half the population, we are a minority in a male's eyes, and unfortunately, a lot of males inflict violence upon women. It's not to say that it doesn't go both ways. However, it has been reported more by women. So, again, there will be resources down below for you to check out if you need those resources. Please reach out to somebody who you know who can help you, and you will get through this. So the book starts off with Caitlin waking up to find out her sister ran away. It's the morning of her 16th birthday, and she and her sister has left a gift for her by the door. Everyone is freaking out, calling all of Cassandra's friends. And Caitlin's birthday essentially falls to the wayside, right? It would, because your sister running away would take precedence over your birthday. Unfortunately, it is just what would happen because you can't just ignore that even though she is 18. So reading this book back as an adult, I thought that was so incredibly selfish of her sister. She should have waited one day. You had to take this away from your sister as well. You couldn't just have waited one day. I know I have a lot of bias towards the younger sisters in general. I am the younger sister. And I'm the one who does live in my sister's shadow, so I definitely relate to Caitlin in those instances, and I can understand her frustration of being in the shadow, of never getting as good of grades, of trying to do things she's never done, of being a little bit, I guess, not necessarily always more rebellious, but of always trying to find a way to be different. Especially in this book, they're only so many years apart. They're 2 years apart, and they look very similar. That when they were younger, their mom even dressed them up in similar clothes, and people thought they were twins, and her mom thought that was the most adorable thing because they looked so similar. So I can understand how frustrating it must be, but I do think that I know her sister was struggling with her own things. I think it is incredibly selfish, though, to take away someone's birthday when it's supposed to be all about them, but then make it about yourself, because then the next few months and every waking hour and minute is spent agonizing over her sister. So it's really just a frustrating thing to go about, in my opinion. And I really think that her sister was only thinking of herself. And I think if she really cared about her, she could have spared one day for her sister. So anyway, getting back into the plot of the story, Caitlin's friend Rena, is the one who knows all about all these things that are going on in her life, then convinces her to try out for cheerleading. It's a sport her sister never did. It's appealing to Caitlin. So she does try out, she gets on the team. In theory, it's a good idea. It's good for her. It gets her to do some extracurricular activities. It gets her mind off of things, and um, I am a big believer in mind, body, and spirit. I, suffer from anxiety and depression. I do take medication, but I also believe that moving your body and, doing some form of exercise, like going for a walk or some light yoga, something like that. I personally have started doing at home Pilates, which has been tough, but I really like it because I like when my body is also physically exhausted. I feel like my mind can also relax a little bit. It's just a good way to get stress out. I understand that's not for everybody, and that's okay, but I do think she needs an outlet, and I think it was, in theory, a good idea for her to try cheerleading, right? My problem with sports in general, and it's coming from someone who studied sports and, who at one point aspired to be a sports journalist, sports can be incredibly clicky. And I would say, unfortunately, cheerleading has a huge stigma around it of being cliquey, not only from other students and other athletes, but also within its own community. There are the people in, I remember in high school, there was cheer and then there was poms. I think one was more dancing, if I'm not mistaken. I truthfully cannot remember 100%. However, I do think that it is a struggle within itself when the community you are trying to be a part of is already separated into these groups and everything, and then you're coming on as a newbie. So, her joining the cheerleading team, though, does pull her mom out of her funk. So, her mom has been in this, like, essentially disassociated state. She has, always thrown herself into Cassandra, the older sister's activities and life. And, like, she even had her Yale school schedule posted on the fridge so she can know what she's doing, which I think is incredibly overbearing. And I think sometimes people need to just find a hobby instead of just like vicariously living through their children. That's not the point though. But as soon as Caitlin joins the cheer team, she is like, okay, this is the schedule. We'll have to make sure your uniforms are clean. We'll make sure to get it to the dry cleaners and all of these things. So she does help her mom in that sense, but it's just giving her mom a sense of control over her life that she doesn't have because her other daughter went missing. And not missing, I guess she's technically a runaway, but I'm like, she also just like left. Like, I don't know if whatever. That's not the point. So, with Caitlin being on the cheer team, naturally she's invited to parties. I had only ever been invited to a handful of parties in my life in high school, and truthfully, I'm okay with that. I feel like I would have just made a fool of myself at parties. I have seen myself drink. I'm not cute when I'm drunk, but anyway. So she goes to parties, and they went to go get a roll of quarters, and I say they as in Caitlin and her friends, her friend Rena and other people. And then she meets Rogerson at a gas station. He's a broody, mysterious guy, and she's attracted, or she's not even attracted to him, but she's pulled to him. Like, she sees something in him. He has curly hair. He's very beautiful looking to her. She ends up going to a party where he later shows up, and she decides to leave with him, and it pisses a lot of people off because Caitlin was supposed to be set up with this football player, and she was supposed to, go home with him and all of these things, but she decides against it. And then she goes with Rogerson, and he takes her home, and they end up making out in front of her house for like a half an hour. So Rogerson kind of ignores her after that, and she does get upset, which I think is kind of funny because it's like, then give him your number. You should have given him your number or something. But I guess he knew where she lived, so he could have just showed up at her door. But anyway, so the cheer team, as most sports or organizations try to do, have like their own philanthropic things. And so she sees him at a nursing home that she's volunteering at. He was there because he had just gotten in trouble with the law, so he was doing some community service. And they run into each other, and she kind of calls him out on his bullshit, which I think is really funny. And it makes me sad, truthfully, like reading the beginning of this book, because I forgot how, there's something, again, like with someone like you, like Macon. I know he was a piece of shit, but at least he like never hit, oh my God, what's her name? He never hit Haley. I know he got into an accident and everything, but he did treat her kindly to an extent. Rogerson is just an absolute jerk. Like he's just scum of the earth, essentially. And but it makes me sad when you see like the sweet moments, and it's like you can get how someone can get caught up in it, right? Like it just happens so quickly, and it's not like someone showing you their dark side as soon as you meet them. But I don't know. It's just something that I think about a lot when reading stories like this, and then just kind of it's more so trying to understand how these things continuously happen. Not that it's ever the victim's fault, because it's not. It's more so understanding how they get pulled into it, because it can just happen to anyone. Really, it can just happen on a whim, and it's sad because it shouldn't be like that. No one should ever have to fear the person that they thought they loved. So eventually he asks her out at this nursing home, and her mom doesn't like him too much because she's heard some things about him, but she does let her go out with him. And I do cut her mom slack more than I do the other Sarah Dessen moms in her universe. She's scared for her daughter Cassandra, right? She's like, I don't know where she is. I don't know what she's doing. I don't know if she's okay. Like all of these things, but she still always keeps an eye on Caitlin, and I admire that. And then as things unfold later in the story, she's always asking Caitlin things. She's always trying to get to know what's going on, and it's not easy when someone doesn't open up. And I do think there is a point where it's like you can only do so much until it's like an addict, essentially. Like you can only do so much until someone wants to help themselves. But I would say her mom tries very hard and tries to figure out what's going on, because she can tell that something is off with Caitlin. But she just doesn't know what. So I do give her a lot more credit. I do think, however, there is something to be said about focusing on one child more than the other, but I do think she really does try. When Keelan and Rogerson first go on a date, it's not necessarily a date. They just kind of drive around because he sells illegal things that I'm sure can get me like flagged on YouTube, but it begins with a D and ends with a G S if it's plural. I think you guys get it. Really go on dates. They just like kind of drive around while he does his business and everything. She meets his parents, which I think is wild. And she meets his dad, and his dad is incredibly intense, and he doesn't even know that Caitlin is there. And he actually ends up hitting Rogerson because he showed up late to whatever function they were at. And Caitlin is there to comfort him after this, and I mean, it is a hard thing to kind of deal with and know what to and know how to navigate it at 16 years old, especially if this is not something that you've ever been accustomed to. If you have two stable parents, or if you have, regardless of what your situation is at home, most of the time, if you don't have that in front of you, you don't necessarily know how to deal with it. Also, these are children, and eventually it escalates because Caitlin is talking to a guy outside the school or whatever, and Rogerson comes to pick her up, and then he says something, and she jokes. She says, "Oh, come on, don't be such a baby," or whatever, and he smacks her across the face. And he's like, don't ever talk to me like that again. And she's like, what the hell just happened? And she can't even admit it to herself, which I think is a huge thing, right? Like, I think it takes a lot to admit to yourself when your partner is hurting you, and or if you are an addict as well, just like that you have a problem. That's a huge first step. And so her sister gave her a journal for her birthday, and so she keeps trying to write, and in this journal she essentially is trying to write to her sister, but she can't even admit it. And I think that's very telling, because it's almost like she doesn't want to believe it. And of course, after that, he is nice to her, he's kind to her, he's trying to do all of these things to kind of quote unquote make it up, which is essentially what abusers do. Again, I want to take this moment and say no one deserves to be hit by their partner in any type of way. No one deserves any type of abuse from their partner. I am linking resources below. Any hotlines or anything to help get you out. It's no one's fault but the person causing the pain to you. You deserve better. You deserve to be loved. You do not deserve to be abused in any sort of way. National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. I'll be linking that along with other resources down below, but please again know that it's not your fault and you deserve all the help that you can get to get out of that situation. I think Rogerson himself, though, as a character, does open up the discussion of how hurt people hurt people. He doesn't need to be he doesn't need to abuse Caitlin, but he does. He doesn't need to tell her she deserves it, but he does. His dad hits him and tells him that he deserves it, and that's messed up. His dad shouldn't hit him, but it does not give him the excuse to go and then hit Caitlin because she didn't do anything either. It's clearly a learned behavior, and you know when someone hits you, you want to have that power. It's messed up. It doesn't excuse his actions. I'm just saying it. There are a lot of people who were abused as children, but don't abuse their own children as adults because they understand that it was wrong. So there's no reason for him to be acting like this. I think it just goes into that mentality of how some people think that, you know, they're hurt, so they need to hurt somebody else, and I it's disgusting in my opinion, and he deserves to rot in hell. Slowly, he starts pulling her away from her friends, her family. She starts cutting class. She starts smoking a lot of POT. And so here's my thing. I think pot is fine, right? I think that it has been decriminalized for a lot of reasons. I think that it was overhyped and criminalized for a bunch of other reasons, but just to, scare people and whatever. But I think it's a problem when you're always high and you're always trying to escape your reality because clearly she is neglecting her schoolwork, she's neglecting her family, her friends, her cheerleading. And I know she wasn't like the most in love with cheerleading, but she's just not being responsible and she's spending most of her afternoons getting high and just ignoring and avoiding everybody. Clearly there is something deeper going on, and it's just really sad to watch someone who potentially had so much potential just kind of waste away because they just don't know what to do with themselves. And I mean, it's just it's really hard. It's hard to read because she knows there's something wrong and she knows that these things aren't okay, but it seems like she cannot pull herself out of it, and I think that's the scariest part. So Caitlin starts ditching her classes as well. Well, she starts like leaving class early to make sure that she's there on time for lunch because Rogerson comes and picks her up for lunch. And she even, in the book, it says he always seemed upset if she was there on time because he didn't have a reason to hit her. And rereading that and like seeing that he was just looking for an excuse to hit her for any type of reason just made me sick to my stomach. Like, I was just like, I don't know how. I remember the plot, right? But the nitty-gritty details are what get me the most because it's horrible. Like, it's so sad and it's just so incredibly painful to be like you're trying so hard to be perfect so they don't hurt you, but that's not even the like you could be the most perfect person in the world and they would find an excuse to hurt you. And it's just really sad. Everyone around her can tell that there's something different about her, that something is going on. Her team eventually kicks her off the team because they're like, you're not committed to this. And she was like, okay, whatever. Her friend Rena is like mad at her because she's like, you never hang out with me and like we can never do anything together and blah blah blah. And she's like, you don't understand. And clearly her friend doesn't understand because she doesn't know what's going on. And Caitlin's trying to keep it that way. And then her parents are, kind of noticing something, but then like her sister calls and actually starts speaking to them again, and they stop paying attention to Caitlin, which is it's so frustrating because it's like you're so close to getting to the point and to pulling her away, and then you just let it be because of your other daughter, which I understand to an extent, but like clearly something is wrong with Caitlin. Her mom does try to actively talk to her and try to, figure out what's going on, which is, I think, why I give her a lot of credit because she does pay attention. She is not perfect. And she would rather talk to her eldest daughter because she believes that Caitlin is seemingly fine, even though she's really not, and because of the fact that Cassandra ran away. So one day, her friend Rena, who we kind of met in the beginning, the one who pulled her onto the cheer team and everything, gets sick of waiting around for Caitlin to be free, comes to quote unquote kidnap her. And Caitlin freaks out because even though she doesn't have plans with Rogerson, she knows that he's going to show up and he expects her to be there. And also, Rogerson is like a horrible name. I'm sorry, I don't know how you picked that name, but it's just such a horrible name. Like, I just don't like it, and I just wish that Dessen picked a prettier one. But that's just like a personal, real weird, nitpicky personal thing. Caitlin freaks out when they're at Rena's lake house. She's trying to call Rogerson, he's not answering, and then she just is freaking out because she knows how bad things are going to end for her. Eventually, Rena's boyfriend drives Caitlin home, which is a whole other problem. And then, of course, Rogerson is there and he starts beating her right on the lawn. And he's like, "What the hell is your problem?" Her mom comes out to save her and essentially sees how bad everything is. Like, she sees the bruises covering her body. Um, he's kicking her. She's just like, doesn't care. She's essentially given up at this point, but thank God, like, the neighbor saw and her mom's coming to save her and everything. And it's so gut wrenching to read about because you're just like watching. It feels almost like slow motion, and it makes me so sad for everybody except Rogerson because that man deserves to be thrown behind bars, and he doesn't deserve sympathy. I'm sorry. I understand that his dad is abusive towards him, but he doesn't get to take it out on somebody else. Like, go figure it out, go report your dad, something else. The book is broken up into 3 sections, so it's like before and then Rogerson and then like kind of an after. And so we see her in rehab. Technically she's there for, smoking pot, but that's not necessarily why she's there. She has her family, though, coming to visit her. She has Rena. And it's sweet that everybody wants to come and see her and make sure that she's okay. They're also all trying to blame themselves to an extent. They're like, we should have paid attention more. We should have done this and blah, blah, blah. But I think everybody needs to just be pointing the finger at Rogerson. Like, everybody just needs to know that he is just the worst. And I understand why they feel that way because they saw these things, like, they saw something happening and they didn't stop it. However, I don't think it's fair to put that blame on yourself because he was going to do something regardless and just a bad person. He did shitty things and that's just that. So Caitlin goes through, her therapy and all of these things and she talks to us about, like, she narrates that she still misses him and she does love him to a certain extent. And clearly that's a completely normal and natural. He did lure her in with his sweet side, like his charming, kind of deep, mysterious personality before completely flipping a coin and just decide to start hitting her and everything. The only time she even felt safe towards the end of the book was when they were having sex. Like, she was like, that's the only time he won't hit me, because she tried to figure out his quote unquote patterns. And she was like, okay, well, if he hits me this day, he won't hit me the next day. But then it just kind of kept happening. It didn't matter what happened. She was just going to be abused anyway. But the only time she felt safe was when they were having sex, which in itself is a form of abuse because of the fact that he was like, it's so bad. Men really just deserve to rot in a jail cell. It made me so upset when I read this again. Someone needed to punch him, just so I could feel just like a little bit of joy. Anyway, Caitlin gets letters from her sister Cassandra. It takes her a really, really long time to even read these letters and really just kind of essentially in a way let her sister back into her life. It broke my heart because I can only imagine what her sister felt and what was going through her mind when all of these things happened, because that is her sister and I'm sure she probably felt a huge weight of the blame. And so in this letter that's incredibly long, we read that, Cassandra was struggling at home. Like, she felt too much pressure on her and she felt like she needed to make her own choices. And she ran away because she didn't want to do the things that her parents essentially wanted for her. It's funny though, because clearly the grass is greener on the other side for both of them, right? Like, they both want what the other has. The other wants to be perfect and the other wants to just always make their own choices. It's a bittersweet moment, but I think they can eventually come to appreciate each other and their own respective lives more because of it. I wonder if they had this conversation in person, if it would have been as effective because of the interruptions and corrections and just like all of the things that go on a face-to-face conversation. You can just be like, well, that's not actually what happened. Oh, wait, what about this? And then you can kind of deviate. So anyway, it ends with her parents throwing a party for Cassandra's homecoming. Her friends are there, and then her neighbors who her parents are pretty close to, and then we even see her sister. And that's kind of how the book ends. And it is so bittersweet to see it wrap up like that, but I'm glad that her sister eventually came home for her. Um, I do really love this book. I can only read it so many times though because it is incredibly intense, but it is so freaking important. So I commend Sarah Dessen for writing this book, and yeah, I really think you guys should read it if you have the capacity to read it. But other than that, would appreciate a like, subscribe, comment down below if you have any book recommendations. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember there are resources if you need it in the bio. Thanks. Bye.